In 2012, the Minnesota Vikings had a really good draft, and then towards the end of the season, AP basically put the team on his back and carried their asses to the playoffs. It was a bit of a surprise to everyone. 2013, though, was maybe a little surprising in just how poorly the season went for the Minnesota Vikings. And maybe it shouldn't, though. When you have questions at the quarterback position, uncertainty at the quarterback position, when you were trying to bring in a guy like Josh Freeman and throw him into the mix on a Monday night game against the New York Giants, maybe it shouldn't be that surprising that 2013 was not a good go for the Minnesota Vikings. So, not surprising to me, they fired the head coach Leslie Frazier. Fair or not, it's what happened. A little surprised they kept the general manager Rick Spielman. You would think he's the one that hired Leslie Frazier. The team underperformed, underproduced. Maybe the general manager should go. Well, he didn't. He's still there. And what also surprised me too is that after having one defensive-minded head coach, Rick Spielman decided to hire another defensive-minded head coach in Mike Zimmer. You would think in a lot of cases you would say, hey, if the reason this guy got fired was because of the inconsistency of the offense, and in particular the quarterback position, you would maybe bring in an offensive-minded head coach to fix that side of the ball. But they went with a guy like Mike Zimmer, somebody that has paid his dues, somebody that has a lot of respect in NFL circles, and somebody I think could do a very good job in Minnesota. But heading into 2014, they have a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position, especially heading into this offseason and heading into the draft. But this was still a team with talent, but also a team in transition. Guys like Antoine Winfield have been out of the fold now. Jared Allen is no longer in the fold. Kevin Williams no longer in the fold. You know, a team with talent with guys like Adrian Peterson and Harrison Smith and Cordero Patterson and Greg Jennings and Matt Khalil. You know, talent is there on that team. Kyle Rudolph, you know, one of their first round picks from this past year as well, Xavier Rhodes. You know, they got another first round pick from last year in Sharif Floyd. They bring in guys like Linval Joseph, Captain Munnerlin. So again, a team with some talent, but a team that is still in transition. A team I think still looking for an identity, and a team that really needs to put it together because they are in a very tough, very competitive NFC North division. So this 2014 draft to me for the Minnesota Vikings was going to be very important because they needed to accumulate some additional talent and they needed to find a way to give their organization some identity. They needed to, you know, give some talent to Mike Zimmer for the defensive side of the ball, but they also needed some direction on the offensive side of the ball, namely the quarterback position. You've got an offensive coordinator like Norv Turner, who has a great track record of working with young quarterbacks and getting the most out of them. At some point in time, you had to find that guy because Christian Ponder sure isn't the answer. Matt Castle sure isn't the long-term answer. You had to find that long-term answer at the quarterback position. And I have to say, once again, for the Minnesota Vikings in the 2014 NFL Draft, job well done. If there's one reason that Rick Spielman, has been able to keep his job, is even with the failure of his first-round pick in 2011, Christian Ponder, he's done a good job of addressing other needs and getting some talent on this team over the past couple of years. You look at his first round picks from 2012, Matt Khalil, Harrison Smith, 2013, Sharif Floyd, Xavier Rhodes, Cordero Patterson, and now into 2014, you get two more first round picks in the fold. Anthony Barr, an explosive edge rusher out of UCLA, a guy that could maybe play outside linebacker in the strong side in a 4-3, maybe could be a defensive end that plays opposite Everson Griffin, maybe is envisioned as a long-term replacement for Jared Allen. To get a guy like that in a division with quarterbacks like in particular Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford, and to a much lesser degree Jay Cutler in Chicago, you have to be able to rush the passer if you're going to win consistently in the NFC North, if you're going to be able to win divisional games. So it makes sense why the Minnesota Vikings would address that, and it was a need. You know, with guys like Kevin Williams out of the fold, and in particular guys like Jared Allen out of the fold, they needed more help on the edges. They needed more edge rushers, and they may very well have gotten one in Anthony Barr. What I really loved the most about this draft was the Minnesota Vikings being able to get to what to me was the best player in this entire draft, the best quarterback in this entire draft, and get him with the last pick of round number 1 in Teddy Bridgewater. What an outstanding move for the Minnesota Vikings. If the Minnesota Vikings would have taken Teddy Bridgewater number 8, I would still be applauding him. But the fact is they traded down from 8 to 9, picked up an additional 5th-round pick to still get their guy in Anthony Barr, keep him away perhaps from the Detroit Lions. And then they move up just a few slots from number like 40 to number 32, get into the last pick of round 1 to get a guy like Bridgewater, who, again, I could have argued they should have been able to take in the top 10 and nobody had complained about. They were able to trade up and get him, and most importantly of all, still get that organizational flexibility of potentially having Bridgewater in the fold for at least 5 seasons with picking up that additional option year because you took the guy in round 1 instead of trying to take him in round 2. Very well played and very smart by the Minnesota Vikings. And you look at this draft in general, who was their best pick? Teddy Bridgewater. I think to me, you get potentially the best player in the entire draft, the best quarterback in this draft, and you get him with the 32nd pick. That's a revelation, and that is a godsend to that organization because Bridgewater can be a franchise changer, and more on that in a moment. The best value pick, perhaps, though, other than Bridgewater, might have been Scott Crichton, the defensive end from Oregon State. Here was a guy that I envisioned as a late first to early to mid second round pick, and they were able to get him in the early portion of round number 3. Again, another pass rusher for an organization that desperately needed edge pass rushers. You could see a Barr be stuck at outside linebacker and maybe be moved around a little bit, and a guy like Scott Crichton at some point in time could start as a rookie at defensive end. That was really good value there. A pick that could really surprise, though, would be their 6th-round selection out of Virginia Tech, Antone Exum. This was a guy that has size similar to Kyle Fuller, has a skill set to me similar to Kyle Fuller, but he was injured and missed most of the 2013 season. But there's a tremendous amount of upside there. And to be able to get a guy like him in the 6th round, like I said again, really could surprise some people with his contributions to the organization, if not as a rookie, but long-term. First, maybe as special teams, and then as a 10 and 15 cent nickel dime corner, and then maybe at some point in time potentially developing into a starter, or maybe you flip him to safety and put him opposite Harrison Smith, which I thought was a need for this organization as well, as to get another safety. The only thing I really second guess about this draft is Anthony Barr, because you could see the upside and you could see the talent there, but you also see a lot of inconsistencies. I would maybe be a little bit better with this move for the Minnesota Vikings if they were running a 3-4 in 2014. But to me, you're taking Anthony Barr as a 4-3 strong side linebacker. Now, maybe he has a Von Miller type of contribution, and maybe he's a guy that ends up validating this pick at 9th overall. I just wonder if you're going to address the defensive side of the ball, was Anthony Barr a better player on the board than an Aaron Donald or a Justin Gilbert at this point in time? I really don't think so. That's just me. And again, with taking a quarterback like Bridgewater, if you knew you were going to maybe do that with the last pick of round number 1, maybe you could have taken an offensive player here. I don't think there's enough talk about the fact that Minnesota's offense isn't all there either. It's not just the quarterback. They could use more at wide receiver. They could use more help on the offensive line. So maybe the pick could have been a Taylor Lewan or a Zach Martin or a guy like an Odell Beckham, or you bring in a guy like Eric Ebron. There were a lot of options. There were a lot of choices, and I thought it was curious that Minnesota ended up going with Anthony Barr in the top 10. But in general, I thought this was a really good draft for the Minnesota Vikings over the past few years. I felt like Rick Spielman has done a good job of adding some talent to this organization, using draft picks as currency. In the 3rd straight year, they got multiple first-round picks. That's impressive. To be able to get a guy like Bridgewater at number 32, this again could be a franchise-changing thing. Instead of having to just take him in the top 10, they played the draft board. They got another guy that they really liked that filled a position of need, and were still able to get their guy at quarterback that could work with Norv Turner and be the long-term answer in a division where you have to have a long-term answer at quarterback. If you're going to keep up with the Green Bays and the Detroits, and yes, even the Chicagos, you have to trot out something better than Matt Castle and Christian Ponder. And that's where Teddy Bridgewater could come in and really be a savior to this franchise. I really believe that. I'm still a little unsure about Barr over guys, like I said, like Aaron Donald and Justin Gilbert, and guys even on the offensive end like Taylor Lewan and Zach Martin and Eric Ebron and Odell Beckham Jr., but they also got some really good values in this draft, too. I really like Jerick McKinnon, the running back from Georgia Southern that they got in late round 3. Here's a guy I think can do a bunch of different things for them. Getting a guy like David Yankey in the fifth round, an offensive guard from Stanford, a kind of road grading left or right guard that again could help out your best player, Adrian Peterson, and your young quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater. Getting guys like Exum and Kendall James in round number 6, again, really good value. I really like a lot of what the Minnesota Vikings did here in general. They had a really good draft, a really good weekend, and I ended up giving them a grade of an A minus.